the different ways they can write square roots. So we're going to go ahead and this is our lesson 2.7. We're going to write that. And our learning goal today is find square roots and compare real numbers. Oh, sorry. Stop the screen. Just let me know. Find square roots and compare real numbers. So you guys should be very familiar with what square roots are. So, I mean, my goal today is not to teach you square roots, but I do want to make sure that you know the difference between the different types of square roots that you can see and what makes them different. So I'll give you a second to write that down because I'm probably going a little fast. And then we're going to fill in, I'm going to tell you some different stuff about them. Can anybody guess what they're wanting on letter A? Why do they have that funky little system out in front of it here? Carter? Good guess. Good guess. David? Well, how can I have two answers? How can I have a positive and a negative? I'll get what same thing? Jackson?
If you multiply the two, even if it's a negative, if you multiply two negatives together, you still get a positive.
Very good. So you guys all know the square root of 36 is 6. But if I was to take 6 times 6, I get 36. But also, if I change this to negative 6 times negative 6, a negative times a negative is always a positive also. So what they're saying here is that they want the positive and the negative square root of 36. They want both answers. So some books are going to write it like this. Some books are going to write it like this to show two answers. Okay? So you can write it either way, but that's what that means. Okay? If you come across them like this, the square root of 49, the only answer here is 7. That's it. They're not wanting the negative square root. They're only wanting the positive one. And then if they do it like this, they're only wanting the negative square root. Okay? And so then that's your answer. Okay? So then my question for you is, can I do this? Is that legal?
Yes.
What do you guys think?
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't?
You
I can?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, somebody give me some reasons why you think. You got to be able to justify your answer here. Joanne?
Because if you put negative on the outside to make it where it's equal to negative 4, then that will make it a positive. If you put the negative on the outside,
So why can't I just say this? Why can't I do that? Tim? Why?
it's a rule.
It's a rule. What is a negative 2 times a negative 2? Positive 4. So is there any way, because isn't square root the exact same thing times the exact same thing? There's not an exact times an exact that's going to give me a negative square root of 4. And if you try it on your calculator is going to give you an error. Okay? Now, when you get into Algebra 2, you're going to get into this thing called imaginary numbers. And that's a whole nother set of numbers. And then they're going to find a fancy way to make this legal. But right now in our world, this is not legal. You can't have that. You can't have a negative on the inside of the square root. Okay? So that's not okay. This is okay. This is not okay. All right. Very good. Okay, then you're going to have some directions that look like this. And they're going to say approximate the square root to the nearest integer. So we have to remember what integer is, or otherwise this will mess you up. Integer does fall in the real number system. Yes, it does. All of our numbers that we deal with in algebra fall in the real number system. Anybody remember what an integer is? Gracie? Very good. This was your positive and negative whole numbers. Okay? So when you come across something like that in the directions, you're going to have to know what they're wanting. Okay, so this does not mean you plug it into your calculator. This means they want you to estimate what this is close to. So when I do this, I just kind of think in my head, well, 5 squared is 25, 6 squared is 36, okay, 32 is closer to 36, so that means the nearest integer here would be 6. Okay, so if I'm looking at letter B, and they're saying the negative square root of 48, and I say, okay, well, 7 squared is 49. Well, the square root of 48 is really close to 49, and I want the negative, so my answer is going to be negative 7. And that's what they're wanting there. Okay, sometimes you'll see them say between two integers. So if it says between, then you would have to write between, like this one, you'd have to write between 5 and 6. This one you would write between 6 and 7. So you just have to read the directions and see what they're asking you to find. Okay? All right. Last thing, I want to make sure you guys know how to do is this stuff here. We're going to be ordering them. And then I want to review some vocabulary with you so that you know what those words are, because those words are going to show up. Yeah, first of all, make sure you always pay attention to your directions. Sometimes it is say from least to greatest. Sometimes it is say from greatest to least. Okay, I'm going to show you how I do it. You may do this any method you want, but I think my method is a pretty good method. I like to just kind of create myself a little mini table here. And in order to compare, you guys should realize that they all have to be in the same form. So either all in fraction or all in square root or all in whatever. And it makes the most sense here to convert them all over to decimals. It makes it a lot easier to tell what's going on with your numbers. So I would convert them each into a decimal, which some of these I can do in my head and some of them I can't. So 4/3 as a decimal would be 1.3 repeating. I would probably have to do the square root of 5, and I'm getting negative 2.24 if I round correctly. Square root of 13, 3.61. A lot of times I like to round to the nearest hundredth. Sometimes they'll be closer. These, obviously, it's not that big of a deal, but a lot of times the nearest hundredth is a good place to round. All right, and then I'm going to go from least to greatest. And just remember that when you're dealing with negative numbers, okay, that's the only thing you have to think about, is the one that's the least is the furthest from 0. So if I'm looking at this, the furthest from 0 is this one, is the negative 2.5. So I'm going to order that one. And I'm not going to put this number, I'm going to put this number. I have to order their numbers. So negative square root of 5. Yeah, you can't use your numbers. You have to order these. This right here is our work. We can't order the work. We have to order their numbers. All right, so then the square root of 5. Then I'm going to go to my positive ones. Looks like 4/3 is next. And then after 4/3, it's looking like square root of 9.
Yeah.
And then the square root of 13. All right, now I honestly don't remember if it was, if your homework might ask you to also label what they are. I don't remember if yours did or not. So I want to review these really quick. Okay, so if I'm talking about a real number, what types of numbers are those?
Real.
Yeah, real, not fake, right? This is everything. Everything is real. Except for imaginary, which you guys have not learned yet. So everything, so if they say label these, you got to label everything as a real number. Okay? Then numbers are either rational or irrational. You have to pick. Okay? What's the difference? Into a fraction? Is that what you're trying to say? Because that would be right. Yes, which one of these can be written as a fraction? Irrational or rational? Rational. This one is your fractions. This one is also anything that terminates, which means stops. Okay, so that would be, your whole numbers. That would be 2.5, because you can write that as a fraction. Okay, it would also be anything that repeats. So if it's a fraction that repeats, those would all be rational. The square root of 9 is rational because the square root of the 9 is 3. So those are all rational. Give me an example of irrational. Jackson.
One third.
One third's a fraction, so anything that's a fraction is rational. 0.3 could be written as 3/10. So that would still be a fraction. Elizabeth? Pi. Very good. Pi is a good one to remember for irrational. Because irrational go on forever and ever and ever and ever. They don't stop. They don't terminate. They don't repeat. Other things that are rational are like the square root of 13. Any square roots that aren't perfect are also irrational. So if you can remember those two things, you're good. Okay? We just talked about integer a second ago. Those were your positive and negative whole numbers. And if you don't know what a whole is, you need to go back to kindergarten. That was a joke, but okay. Thank you. There was a laugh. All right. Okay, that is the last thing that I need to talk about with you guys today.